Hey everybody, welcome back to another FUTRtech video podcast. Today, it's just going to be Sandesh and I, and we're going to talk about our predictions for 2022. So stay tuned. So welcome back. With the start of 2022, Sandesh and I thought it would be fun to just take a look forward and think about what we think the year coming up has in store for us. So, welcome, Sandesh.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Do I really have you, or are you just always here? Anyway, it was funny because 2021 was a crazy year. Just a lot of stuff happened, obviously, in the world with the pandemic. Has been just turned upside down, and everything is just crazy. And so looking forward to 2022, it's a little bit of a crapshoot, I gotta say. But, when I started going through my list of things, I just so many things. And I know you felt like you had a lot of things that you were thinking of too. But I think, I just kind of wanted to I bundle them down to, just 5 or so hot ones that we think are the most impactful. And let's go with those.
Yeah.
So without delay, let's get into it. Tell me your first one.
If it's okay with you, here's what I'm thinking. You have 5 nailed down. Let me just show you something really quick, okay?
Okay.
When I started putting this together, I got very excited. So I'm just going to show you here my whiteboard here just very quickly. But these were all the different topics, and I think this is what's interesting about 2022, right? It's like you can talk about predictions. You can talk about personal predictions. You can talk about what's going to happen with travel, what will happen with sports, what's going to happen with crime, with the stock market, with kids, with politics, schools, colleges, the economy. What's going to happen with space travel, mental health, social media? What's going to happen with startups? What's going to happen with COVID? What's going to happen with meetings? Are we going to have meetings on site? I just feel like in general, there's just so much potential of change, and there's so many things to predict, and it's very hard. I mean, there's just the variables have all kind of changed, and so when you first said let's do a thing about predictions, I was thinking, oh, no big deal. We'll pick 3 or 4 and we'll call it a day. But then you really start to think about it, and there is just so much opportunity for just change, and there's so much uncertainty that I think this is a very timely conversation.
Well, I heard you talk about security in your list of stuff. So why don't we start there, right?
Sure.
So here's what I see happening. I mean, I think, we saw just an enormous uptick in, ransomware and attacks last year. And I think that trend's going to continue into this next year. And I think it's going to get substantially worse, right? Yeah. So I think we're going to see significantly more attacks. And I think as we're entering an election year and Russia and China are going to get into it with us. And, I think we're already kind of in a crypto war or, a tech war anyways between our countries. I think that's just going to get a lot more intense. And I think nation state actors are going to be playing a bigger role in a lot of this. And plus, since the money is so big, we're going to see a lot of players entering into that. Now, on the other side of that, I think there's a couple things that are going to happen. We've got the security space is so fragmented right now. I think this is going to be a big year of consolidation. I think we're seeing some of the companies like Lacework and folks like that are going out with the intention of consolidating a lot of different functionality into a platform. But I think there's too many companies out there that just have features. They're not, full product suite, right? Yeah. And so I think we're going to see a lot of acquisitions happening. I think we may even see some, SPACs that are just focused on rolling up security companies. The other thing I think that's going to happen is that because there's just not enough workers to go around in the security space, I think that we're going to see a lot of this stuff getting outsourced. And I think we're seeing all the different companies that are kind of playing in that, XDR, EDR kind of game. They're kind of all, integrating a, more of a service offering around it. And I think that's going to continue to trend that way. And I think, companies like Arctic Wolf are really going to pick up a lot of business over the next year just because, people have nowhere to go to get this.
And also just SaaS-based cybersecurity companies, just in general, right? Just that whole market. When we say managed services now, it really SaaS is managed services, right? So, dude, so you and I had very similar.
So I have one more piece to that whole security thing. I think also considering what kind of year 2022 is going to be, I think disinformation is going to be really big. I think it's going to be worse than it's ever been. And in fact, I think it's going to be so intense that I think corporations are going to have to deal with it. I don't know if you saw recently, like a former founder of a company out in Utah, he just completely went off the rails on all sorts of conspiracy theories and, the vaccines, committing genocide and all that stuff. And so, some of these things are creeping into the boardrooms, and so they're creeping, coming out of the mouths of CEOs, and they're potentially really damaging to businesses. Not only that, but just sort of reputational damages, companies get into some of this. So I think we're going to start to see the rise of disinformation consultants in the corporate world too, which will be an interesting thing this year.
Interesting. Yeah. And do you categorize that in with cyber? Do you put?
I do. I consider that. I think that's all going to end up rolling up into the whole security bucket ultimately, anyways, right?
Yeah,
because it's another focus of risk, right?
Yeah. That's interesting, right? Because for me, I put that more into the social media and the media category. But I totally agree with what you're saying, though. Yeah. The one thing with security for me, dude, and everything else I agreed with you. I also feel like there is a tolerance being developed, I guess. With security, I feel like there's just so much. Sometimes
it's not a tolerance; it's a desensitization, and
desensitization. That's exactly the word.
Yeah, and just look at this huge vulnerability that we just had with the Log4j. That's a massive problem, and people are just kind of like, eh.
It's because I think when that happens, it's
too much.
The problem is so hard to solve that they're just kind of like, what do I do?
It's a lot of work, but it's not that hard of a problem because there's a patch. It's but still, people are not getting. I think it's just people have been hit with so much. It's just another thing.
Yeah, and the people part too. I think the people part is going to continue to be a challenge, and I think services are going to be a big opportunity for people in 2022 for cyber. But at the same time, we have to find those people that are willing to do that consulting or that work or whatever it is to get them out there. So I just feel like there's this huge gap in supply and demand. The demand is super high, and and even for us, we can't find them, right? So
I'm going to move on to next. I'm going to go to crypto. How about? That was another one you had on your list there. And I know we may not entirely agree on this. I think that we're going to see a lot. I mean, we've already seen within the crypto market, cryptocurrency market, tons of scams, and just a huge amount of, little initial or ICOs that have been, just scams, and, a lot of things that just quite frankly look like pyramid scams happening in that space. And, unregulated currency markets tend to attract not the best people. And so I think there's some really interesting things going on there. And I like the idea of a decentralized currency, but I just don't see the stability in it all, to replace fiat currency anytime soon. And I think that what we're going to see is that there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be getting bit really bad in this. I think some people are going to lose a lot of money in this space. And I think, when we look at the NFT space right now, I think we're in an NFT bundle. I mean, I was just reading this thing where they were talking about art-based NFTs, and there were 41 billion Ethereum NFTs in the art space. the global art market is $51 billion. So just put that in perspective, NFTs, 41 billion, total market, 51 billion, right? And so I think there's some really, potential for big problems in that space.
So that's why, honestly, that's why I had crime up there. So like so I think there's like a correlation between a lot of this stuff that's happening. And I think so in crypto, for me, I'm starting to learn about it. I'm starting to just like, I'm to the point now where I'm about to make my first, like, I'm going to put some money into it. And it's really all to learn. So I'm not trying to make money from it. I just really want to understand it. And so I feel like that's a good way for me to start. And the more I'm talking with people, the reason why I think my prediction for next year is that crypto will double in terms of how many people, percentage of the world. So right now, 3.9%, according to a recent article that I read, if you put it into Google, it's like the first one that comes up every time. But they say it's 3.9% of the world population that currently has money,
has some sort of
some kind of crypto. Yeah. And so I think it's going to go from 3.9 to 8. That would be my prediction, because if some clown like me is looking to do it, I think that a lot of people do it. But you hit on something that's very interesting too, is that I feel like in general, a prediction that I have is that there's so much opportunity for crime. Crime is now changing, and it's a different types of crime. So now you have people that can commit these crimes, and there's so many people that are opportunistic. The market's been down. You got, people aren't really happy. There's a lot of like just, and you and I have life good, man. And some of the people they're very, very desperate, and desperate people will do desperate things. And I think like with just COVID and like COVID testing labs and all this kind of stuff that are going on, popping up, there's like the guys that do it ethically and the ones that don't. So you're always going to have that. And my opinion about like, the population. I think we're getting more and more dummies. It's and I think the Idiocracy movie is really spot on. And so it does worry me, because we have to worry about the people that get into those places of influence and positions of power and then use it in a bad sense.
And the bigger thing is the lack of sophistication of some of the people who are going to be getting into these markets. I mean, you're talking about a very speculative market, right? And when you get into speculative markets, the unsophisticated investor in these things has a tendency to think the market just goes up, right? They're not they're not cognizant of the the downturns that these things can take. And we've seen huge movements in Bitcoin over the years.
But can I ask a question though on that one though? Like, what is the difference between putting money into, like, when I look at the stock market, and I don't invest a lot, but when I look at the stock market, I say, do I like the company? Do I like the people? Is this a trend or a market that I think is going to continue? Blah, 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 blah. So like with crypto, the way I understand it is like there's a lot of research. The ones that are doing it like professionally, what they're doing is a lot of research, and they're just spending a lot of time on like these companies. So so there's going to be the good ones, and there's going to be like the bad ones, and I think they're trying to avoid the bad ones, and they're trying to use research for that. But what's the difference between using a stock market to put your investment in crypto? I mean, you're still taking a risk. I think
stock markets are extremely speculative and some in many regards detached from reality. However, stock market is heavily regulated by the SEC. You have it tied to the fortunes of companies, which go up and down, and they have real earnings and they have real products. But doesn't that just come
tie back down to risk? I mean, it just comes down to like crypto being to me, crypto is just a lot more risk.
Tremendous amount of risk, because it's just purely fictional.
And I'm not saying that it's not risky as hell. I'm just saying that there's gonna be a lot of people doing it.
Well, but the problem is that because it's not regulated, like the stock market is, you have a lot of people dumping a lot of money into this, and some who can afford to lose it, some who can't, and some who understand what they're getting into, and some who don't understand what they're getting into. So I think it just, when you have a situation like that, it can become exploitive really fast. And I think we do have to have some sort of rules around some of these things, right? And I know there's lots of different exchanges and things like that are doing things to try to rein some of this stuff in. And there's a place for it. I just don't see it replacing fiat currency anytime soon. And I think what we're going to have is we're going to see some really big mistakes happening probably this year that are going to really turn people's heads.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. And that's also why I think, again, is that the innovation is going so fast, right? Like I don't even think the majority of Americans really truly understand how cryptocurrency works, right? I mean, if we were to take a real poll, I'd bet you it's like in the less than 10% that truly understand how it all works, and the education is not. And so like I think
Well, and
that,
some of the
that needs to
nuances
be
of it are
blended.
some of the nuances of it are very complicated too.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of less sophisticated people are going to get really burned. So one last thing I just want to throw under crypto, because I do see a bit of a shining light on the NFT space, and that's going to get into the next topic I'll talk about,
Okay.
which is in the metaverse, right? I mean, metaverse is not going to be one cohesive thing, at least initially. It's going to be pockets of metaverse, and you're going to have to, being able to buy something in one portion of the metaverse and transfer it across other portions of the metaverse is going to be something that people are going to really want to do. And NFTs actually could provide a good mechanism for doing that. So like I think all these things have like really important value. It's just, we have to use them for the right things. So anyways, so now that we started talking about the metaverse, right? I mean, versus like, so much conversation about metaverse. And I think the interesting thing is that like the metaverse already exists, and there are some very dominant players. I mean, Roblox is a metaverse, platform, really. Fortnite's a metaverse platform. Minecraft's a metaverse platform, right? I mean, there's real world things happening. And if you look at the numbers, billions of people really on these platforms. I mean, they're extraordinarily successful, even if people, more my age aren't so deeply involved in it, but it does show the value of the platform. Like my son is, on Roblox, and he's communicating with all his friends, and they have, virtual interactions every day. Right. So I do think the metaverse has a tremendous amount of value in it. But what I would say is that, a company like Meta, Facebook, and creating Meta, I don't think they are heading down the right path right now. I think everybody is terrified of the concept of like Facebook being in control of the metaverse, because Facebook is one of the least popular companies out there. If you look at sort of their trustworthiness numbers, it's extremely low. But the other thing is they're focused so heavily in the VR aspect of it, and I think VR is interesting, I think that's a very niche market. I don't think a lot of people are going to be ready to jump in to the VR world and spend all their day in VR. Plus, I don't think the technology is there yet. I think the technology is probably about maybe at least 5, probably more like 10 years out before we're going to get to the point where we can integrate it so seamlessly into our life. I think, augmented reality and things like that, we'll see a little bit more. And overlaying some of the metaverse concepts onto real reality, I think will be an interesting piece of it. But at the end of the day, I think the problem that the metaverse is struggling with right now is like finding that killer app. And maybe that killer app already exists and it's gaming or, something like that. But I just have a feeling that, this year, if we don't know what that killer app is, it's probably going to be invented this year and, maybe popularized in a couple of years. But I think we're right on the cusp of finding out what that killer app is. And I do want to throw one point out there too, is I think NVIDIA's Omniverse is a really interesting approach to the metaverse, sort of that digital twinning and being able to, build out, whole cities to, figure out antenna placement or whatever you're going to do, creating those kind of virtual spaces to sort of experiment in, I think is a really interesting idea. And I think they're approaching it from a really interesting angle. So we'll see where that all goes. But for right now, I don't think that the immersive VR piece of it is where the market's going to be at.
So basically what you're saying is that the metaverse will be more defined in the year of 2022, and we'll start to see what it really is.
Yes. And I think it's going to be more of a virtual 3-dimensional space presented in a 2D format. Yeah. Next, let me throw it to another technology I think that's going to be really big this year is electric vehicles. I think this is the big year of electrification. And the thing that's going to be interesting about it, I mean, if you look at in 2021, Norway's new car sales electric were 65% of the new car sales were electric in Norway. And if you look at like Ford's, they've got that F-150 Lightning truck. They are now aiming to ship 150,000 units this year, up from their most recent target of 80,000. So even in the Ford F-150, the most popular vehicle in the United States, electrification is really taking off. So I think we're going to see a lot of interesting things happening in this space. I think we're going to see the most important thing that we could figure out is battery tech breakthroughs. As battery technology gets better, that's going to expand so many things.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I think is the most interesting part of the electrification of these vehicles is that I think we're going to see a lot of new players this year. And if you look at Tesla's kind of held the share of the market, but Tesla's in some ways kind of a 90% company. I'm going to get a lot of heat for saying this, but I think they get things to about 90% and then they kind of just like, well, whatever. And so now what we see is like, the Teslas, the build quality's gone down a lot. People are complaining about a lot of issues that they're having. But, and then now we're seeing, like companies like Polestar coming out. We're seeing all the, the legacy car companies, who know how to do things like interiors and stuff like that. They're getting into the game more heavily. But DJI just announced more details about their electric car platform. And if you think about all the DJI drones and gimbals and all the great stuff that's coming out of DJI, which has been, like innovating like crazy over the last year.
They're getting into cars?
Yeah, they're getting into cars. Believe that. And then another company that just announced an electric vehicle is Sony.
Really?
So, I mean, I think the barrier to entry into some of these markets is lower than it was in the traditional, internal combustion world. And so I think we're going to see a lot of different companies stepping into this space. It's an opportunity to kind of upend a lot of stuff.
So when you say electric, you're not necessarily talking about autonomous. You're talking
not
about
autonomous.
Yeah.
I think that I think the autonomous piece just didn't live up to expectations. And I don't think that I'm starting to think that now Tesla will not be the first one to get to the fully autonomous vehicles.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Because you have a lot of like stealth companies out there that are building a lot of stuff like Ghost, for example.
Right.
John Hayes' company and stuff like that. It's like companies like that are doing a lot of things around the edges of, automation and things like that. And I think there's a lot of innovation still to hit the market. It'll be interesting. And Apple, what's Apple going to do?
Yeah.
Apple's been making enormous purchases in the AI space.
Right.
So-
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. I like it. What else you got?
And so then my last category that I kind of threw a bunch of stuff into, and that's just sort of the just, big tech stuff that's going to be happening this year. And I just picked a few things that are just kind of exciting to me.
Okay.
I think the James Webb Space Telescope is going to be huge. This is the biggest telescope we've ever put into space, and it's going to sit at Lagrange 2, which is sort of the other side of the Earth relative to the sun, into a stable spot in space. And it's, going to potentially be able to see back about 13 billion light years, right? So, I mean, you're going to really be able to see, primordial, universe kind of stuff, that's going to be amazing. And I think by the end of the year, we're going to start seeing just some insane things coming out of James Webb Space Telescope. I had another thing that I think is going to be driving the tech space a lot, which is custom silicon. I think we've seen, like with Apple's coming up with their Pro and Pro Max and M1 chips and all that. I think we see how that shift can really dramatically change things. I think, there's so many artificial intelligence chip manufacturers. There's so many new chip manufacturers. Making custom silicon doesn't have the sort of barriers that it used to. And I think we're going to start to see a lot of specialized silicon appearing in things. And that's going to really optimize certain types of platforms. I think 5G rollouts are going to be big this year. There's a lot of FAA battling with the FCC and or airlines battling with the FCC over, these 5G rollouts. But I think that's going to be really impactful because I think the potential of 5G hasn't really been seen yet. And when we finally get it out into the market where people can start taking advantage of it and building, all these IoT devices and things, because 5G is much more of a platform than just a frequency.
Yes,
it's a range of frequencies, a range of types of implementation.
But again, what percentage of the world's population really truly understands the difference between 4G and 5G? I bet you majority would just say, "Oh, it's faster."
Yeah, no, yeah, people. Well, it's in some regards it's slower or the same, but but the thing is, I think we're going to start to see new products being announced
tunable,
and emerging out of this that are going to be really compelling.
Yeah.
I think, biotech this is going to be a big year for biotech. I think, with COVID and all the vaccine research that's been done, I think there's been some really interesting things that have been happening, on that front. And I think we made a lot of progress this year that, accelerated the development of some things. I think we'll see some interesting work on like cancer vaccines and things like that. That'll be really bubbling to the surface this year, which is going to be really exciting. And I think, another thing, too is HPC. I think we've started to see this trend happening already in our customer base, but some of the data analytics needs of companies have shifted into the high performance computing world and hyperscale world, right? And I think there's going to be companies that play in that space are going to get a lot more traction this year.
Yep.
And it's kind of a different animal, right? And there's not a lot of people who know how to do it. And I think those people are going to be in extremely high demand. But it's a cool space.
Yeah. First on the biotech thing, I think, so one of the things that I had was, I think there's just going to be an increase in labs. It seems like the hospitals, our current healthcare system cannot support all these COVID tests and patient and testing and blah 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 blah. And this is going to be something that we're just going to have to keep up with, right? So at some point, you're seeing these clinics being popping up, right? Or these testing centers, even it's like these small little, like literally just people setting up a testing center and just doing it on their own, right?
It's like a spirit Halloween. In the mall.
Right. Which is like, by the way, a huge opportunity to monetize, right? Look, so I know people that are making a lot of money, doing that. But just like everything else that we talked about, then the bad people that are take advantage of it and like fraud behavior because of all the government funding stuff, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But I think with the biotech stuff, there's like I think the labs and being able to actually enable more testing and just get it to people quicker, faster, routinely, I think is going to be important.
Well, and the integration of AI and all that too. I think AI is going to move the needle on a lot of that stuff because it just for the same reason that security is integrating so much AI, it's just there's not enough people to do it. Right.
And then what was your last one? You said HPC. Yeah. What I find interesting about that is the workloads are changing completely, and this is completely business driven, right? The technology. Every time we get into these conversations, it's never about the technology. It's really about like, here's what we need, because those requirements are really important. Do you need it to read or write, or do you need it super fast and a small amount of data, or
CPU?
Yeah, like do you need more capacity, less capacity, front end, back end? I mean, there's so much. Do you need DR? Do you need to be able to like recover it? Do you want to manage it? Like
what kind of schedulers do you need?
All of that kind of stuff, right? And so I agree with that too. So, dude, I think we hit on a lot. On the supply chain side, all I see is just the prices just continuously going up. And I
would agree with that.
Yeah. And I don't think that you can rely on the supply chain like you used to be able to. And I think that's a real big deal too now. It's like we used to be able to just, the quality was there. If we knew we were going to buy something and the customer was going to be shipped and this and that whole system typically worked pretty well. Now that the whole system is dealing with all these different other factors, we're seeing just a tremendous amount of issues.
I totally agree with that.
I think I was just talking about crime. I just think crime is, we got to be careful. Crime is changing, and the world is changing, and people are just going to always take advantage of things, and you just got to be a little more vigilant. I worry about it, for sure. Just people taking advantage of, like just people like knowing where my phone is and turning on your camera and you know what I mean, all that stuff just trips me out. Social media, you said something to me the other day, which was really interesting about TikTok kind of taking over YouTube and stuff like that. See, that's where I put more of my like disinformation. Was the social
I
media
don't.
thing
I
is
don't think any
killing
of the
it.
big properties have any reasonably good plan to combat disinformation. I do. On the one hand, I do think that TikTok has a little bit of a better approach to that sort of thing in some regards because of the way their algorithm works. Based on sort of your interests rather than sort of your wider circle of friends and things like that, and other things factored into it. I think you get better results on TikTok,
Yeah.
as opposed to like a Facebook, which is just toxic. Although
Yep.
they've done some things to try to make that better. I just don't think that those platforms, they're not designed around like a customer service model. Like, I had this I did a survey for AWS the other day. And one of the things that I have a problem with is like, AWS is an amazing, selling machine. But if you have a problem and you need to talk to a person, it's not always the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, that's true.
And Amazon's probably better than almost all of them, but like Facebook, where do you, if something happens, where do you go? They don't have any staff to talk to you, to help you to fix some of these problems, and to staff up to that, would just devour their massive profits.
And that's the
Right.
problem, isn't it?
And that's
Ultimately,
their business model isn't based in customer service.
greed,
So-
my friend, greed.
Yeah.
And the last one that I will just touch on is just startups. I feel like there's still going to be a lot of money in the market. I don't know why the market still keeps to perform well, but it does. And there's just so many problems as we've seen and we talked about. There's so many problems to be solved now that because of all these problems, technical, non-technical, many of them non-technical, right? I think there's just going to be a lot of problems to be solved. And so I think this is the era of the generation of entrepreneurship. I think we're just going to see so many entrepreneurs, and there's so much technology available to the younger generation. I think they're gonna find ways to fix, the crap that we have.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I would say, though, I think we're in a bit of a VC bubble right now.
I know.
And I think that we had so much money going into the venture side of things, just more than we've ever seen before.
Yeah, right.
And I think, you look at some of the valuations that some of these companies have and the amount of raise that they're getting, it's just like, it's off the charts. And I think that what's happened is there's been such a glut of money and not enough companies to invest in that I think some of the companies that maybe shouldn't have been invested in have been invested in it. So I think there's going to be a high failure rate of a lot of the companies that,
agree.
have been getting money lately.
I agree.
But that said, I think there's going to be some absolute massive winners coming out of it too.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, and I also think like in that whole startup space, I think partnerships are going to be important. I think as like partnerships or like acquisition type of things. Not to get negative, but like just from a business perspective, one of my things was like, because of all the crap that is going on in our world right now, partnerships are dwindling. We're not working together as well as we used to. Those like that trusting relationship of like that we needed. And this is not just like one-on-one people like you and I working together, blah, 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 but it's also companies, right? It's like, how do you, we need everyone to win. And I think what I'm starting to see, unfortunately, is a lot of people that are like, I don't care, as long as I win, I don't really care about anybody else, And I think that's, again, goes back to a lot of that, hey, we're going after these markets, IPOs are big right now. It's just, I mean, look, people are going to, capitalize on that opportunity. I can't blame them that they're going after it. I wish there was more good people, kind of that had a ton of money, but that's just
my last prediction for 2022 is that this new background I'm just going to be tweaking for the rest of my life.
Well, I'll tell you,
last
it's motivated me. It's motivated me. Like I'm gonna have to look at mine and spice it up. That is another prediction I have: is mine will change when I find time.
All right, I'm excited. I'm excited for it.
So am I, because I saw yours. I love how it's super bright and everything. Looks nice. I'm gonna get rid of the
black
whatever.
wall?
Yeah, whatever that is. The soundproofing.
Soundproofing.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to do something though, because that's an echoey room. So, anyways, thanks for watching. If you have thoughts on what you think are the next big things for 2022, love to hear them. Put them in the comments. Let's have a conversation about it. Thanks for watching. And if you like what you saw, please consider giving us a like and think about subscribing. And Sandesh and I will see you in the next video.